It's 3:14 a.m. Your mind wakes up before your body does. Your eyes are open. The room is the same, yet it feels alien, distorted by the darkness. Your brain screams, "Move." A finger doesn't respond. Your arm lies like a stone. Your lungs are compressed, as if someone is sitting on your chest. The air is thick and cold. The only sound is the deafening pound of your own heart in your ears. And then it comes. The feeling that you are not alone. A panicked gaze darts across the corners, catching on the shadows. There, in your peripheral vision, the darkness coalesces. It takes on a form. A blurry, ragged silhouette of a person. It takes a step out of the shadows and freezes by your bed. Up to 40% of the world's population has experienced this paralysis. That's nearly 3 billion people. But here is the first paradox. Why are the most imaginative people, those capable of creating worlds, more often victims of this primitive terror? Their mind should be a shield, not a prison. And the main question, what explains the appearance of the same dark silhouette among people from different cultures and eras? If this is a random brain malfunction, why does it always generate the same nightmare? This is not a collection of horror stories. This is a neurobiological guide. By the end of this film, you will receive 7 keys that will allow you to crack the code of the shadow people. You will understand how our brain constructs humanity's most ancient nightmare, and you will reclaim control. The first key to control is understanding how your eyes, your primary tool for perceiving the world, systematically deceive you. Your peripheral vision is not designed to distinguish details. Its evolutionary purpose is to instantly detect motion. It's an ancient, low-resolution but high-sensitivity predator detector. However, the reality is shocking. Up to 90% of what you see with your peripheral vision is filled in by your brain. Your vision is like a river. In the center is a clear, fast current where you see everything. Along the edges is the murky water near the banks, where the brain guesses the shape of the riverbed. A coat on a chair in the dim light instantly becomes a hunched figure. This visual error is only the first level of the illusion. But what if the eyes see correctly, and it's the body that is paralyzed? Why do shadows at night seem not just like an absence of light, but something alive, tangible? The rod cells in your eyes are responsible for night vision. They see the world in a grainy black and white format, creating constant visual noise. Under normal conditions, your brain actively filters and ignores this noise. It works like a sieve, sifting out visual debris. But in a state of fear, such as during sleep paralysis, this filter shuts down. The brain flips the sieve over and begins to desperately examine every speck, searching for patterns of threat. The dark silhouette is the perfect image for the brain to construct from a lack of data and heightened noise. It creates it from nothing. But this visual glitch is just the tip of the iceberg. What causes the brain to make such a profound error? You frantically turn on the light, and the monster turns out to be a pile of clothes. This is pareidolia, an innate mechanism for finding faces and human forms in chaos. But in darkness and under stress, it becomes hyperactive. The brain doesn't just happen to see a silhouette, it actively searches for one in any ambiguous shape. For our ancestors, there were 2 types of errors, a safe one and a fatal one. Seeing a predator where there is none is safe. Missing one is fatal. The brain recognizes a human-like silhouette in just 100 milliseconds, faster than you can blink. The shadow person is not what you see. It is what your brain is desperately trying to see. Now imagine this mechanism activating when you cannot move. If all of this is just a trick of the eye, where does the all-consuming terror and feeling of physical helplessness come from? We've established that our eyes are unreliable in the dark, and our brain is a brilliant artist, painting threats out of nothing. But this theory collapses the moment we remember the main symptom, physical paralysis. A visual illusion doesn't explain why the body becomes a prison, why it's impossible to scream, why the heart pounds with terror. This isn't just something you imagined, it's a real physical experience. We've analyzed the glitch in the camera. Next, we will dive into the glitch in the operating system, the mechanism that turns your body into its own prison. Why did nature create a mechanism that completely shuts us down every night? This is the second key. Your brain is on lockdown. During the REM sleep phase, when dreams are most vivid, the brain activates a brilliant defense system, muscle atonia. It literally disconnects the body so that you don't physically act out your dreams and harm yourself. Scientists understood sleep paralysis is not a disease, but a desynchronization. Your consciousness has already switched on, but the lockdown system has not yet received the command to stand down. It's not a malfunction, but a timing error in a completely normal process. Muscle atonia is like holding your breath underwater. Sleep paralysis is when you suddenly realize you are underwater, but have forgotten how to give the command to inhale. Where does the horrifying feeling that someone is sitting on your chest and suffocating you come from? You try to scream, but no sound escapes your throat. Muscle atonia affects all skeletal muscles, including those in the larynx and chest. But here is where the nightmare is born. Your brain, in a panic, sends the command, scream, breathe deeper. But it receives no response from the muscles. The brain interprets this gap between the command and the lack of a signal as an external obstacle. Something is holding me down. I'm being suffocated. The very word nightmare comes from the Old English mare, an evil spirit that sat on one's chest. The sensation of suffocation is phantom pain from non-responsive muscles. The brain itself creates a demon to explain this sensory paradox. How is it that the most creative minds, capable of building worlds, are most often trapped by this nightmare? Think of your most realistic dream. For a second, did it feel real? Now imagine waking up inside that dream. On the border between sleep and wakefulness, the brain's logic centers are still asleep, while the centers for emotion and imagination are working at full capacity. Studies show a direct correlation between creativity and the frequency of sleep paralysis. Their brains are simply better at blending dream elements with reality. The mind of a creative person is like a world at twilight, where the lines between day and night are blurred. This is not a sign of weakness. It is a side effect of a powerful imagination. Do you consider yourself a creative person? So the body is paralyzed, the eyes are deceiving you, and your imagination is in overdrive. But where does the figure itself come from? Why doesn't the brain, in this vulnerable state, generate something neutral? We've understood the mechanism of paralysis. It's a defense system with a timing glitch. We understand why creative people are more vulnerable. But this only explains the stage, not the script. Paralysis is the stage. Brain desynchronization is the actor's state. But who writes the play? Who casts the dark silhouette in the lead role? We have dealt with the hardware, the physiology of paralysis. Now we will hack the software, the program that generates the hallucinations. Why do the events of a normal dream fade from memory in 5 minutes, while an encounter with the shadow remains with you for life as a completely real event? The answer is that it's not a dream. It's a hypnagogic hallucination. Dream elements seep into reality when you are on the border between worlds. But here's the difference. During this hallucination, your visual and auditory cortices, responsible for perceiving reality, are already active. The brain processes the image of the shadow in the same neural networks it would use for a real person. To your brain, there is no difference. fMRI data shows that visual cortex activity when seeing the shadow is 95% identical to the activity when seeing a real person. For your brain, it is actually happening. But why does it choose the image of a presence? What if scientists could turn on the feeling of a ghost in the room with the push of a button? In 2006, Swiss neuroscientist Olaf Blanke did it for the first time. By stimulating a patient's left temporoparietal junction, he made her feel a dark figure standing behind her, mimicking her every move. Here's how it works. This brain region is responsible for creating our internal body map. Electrical stimulation causes a glitch, which the brain interprets as the appearance of a second shadow body next to its own. The brain doesn't realize this is its own error and attributes the shadow to an external source. The shadow person is not a visitor from another world, but a glitch in your own body map. Your neural doppelganger. But why does this double always seem hostile? How can the brain not only see a figure but also feel its malicious intent? Inside you operates an ancient presence detector, a system that is hypersensitive to any sign of another consciousness. In a state of paralysis and panic, it operates at its limit. Your body is screaming of a threat, but there is no visible cause. The brain cannot tolerate this paradox. It cannot accept causeless fear. So it finds a solution. It projects the internal threat onto an external object, the hallucination. The shadow becomes the scapegoat for your panic. The brain searches for the source of terror just as we search for the source of a sudden loud noise. Finding none, it creates the figure in the corner itself. Remember this formula. The terror does not come from the shadow. The shadow comes from the terror. But why does this monster always have the same face? Or rather, a lack of one? We've understood how the brain creates the illusion, the paralysis, and the hallucination. But we haven't answered the main question: why do millions of people see the same thing? We've reverse-engineered the nightmare's neurobiological engine: hyperactive sensory zones, a body map glitch, the projection of internal terror. It seems the mechanism is fully disassembled. But this doesn't explain the universality of the image. Why not a giant spider, a snake, or abstract patterns? Why specifically a dark, tall, often male silhouette with no face? Neuroscience explained how it works, but not what you see. Next, we will move from neuroscience to psychology. We will see how our brain, like a search engine, in a moment of terror finds the most ancient and frightening image that myths, memes, and evolution itself have installed in it. Have you ever felt like you were being watched and instinctively turned around? This isn't a sixth sense. It's your built-in presence detector at work. For our ancestors, there were two mistakes: thinking there was a predator in the bushes when there wasn't, or not noticing a predator when there was. The first mistake is safe. The second is fatal. Evolution has wired your brain to default to searching for another consciousness. Your detector is like an overly sensitive smoke alarm. It would rather go off from the steam of a kettle than miss a real fire. During sleep paralysis, your body is in a state of panic. The brain desperately searches for the source of this threat. Finding none, it delivers a verdict: someone is here. The feeling of a presence is not the perception of something external. It is the interpretation of your own panic. What if scientists could make a healthy person feel a ghost in a laboratory? In one experiment, a robotic arm mirrored a subject's movements with a slight delay, touching their back. This was enough to create a persistent feeling that another person was standing behind them. But here's what's amazing. The same effect was achieved without a robot, using only brain stimulation. This stimulation caused a desynchronization between the brain's command to move and the sensory feedback from the body. The brain interpreted the signal from its own hand as the touch of a stranger. A delay of just 50 milliseconds was enough to create the illusion. The shadow person could be you, a neural echo of your own body that the brain mistakes for an outsider. But what about those who hear footsteps or breathing in a completely silent room? Your presence detector works with all your senses. The brain starts listening for the slightest sounds: a creaking floorboard, the hum of the refrigerator, the beat of your own heart. And it interprets them as signs of a threat. But in a state of terror, it goes further. It doesn't just look for confirmation, it creates it. These are auditory hallucinations. The brain itself generates the sounds it fears most: footsteps, whispers, heavy breathing. It's like the phantom vibration of a phone in your pocket. There is no stimulus, but the brain, anticipating one, creates the sensation itself. The footsteps in the dark are the soundtrack your brain writes for the horror movie it is also directing. So, we understand why the brain decides someone is in the room. Your ancient presence detector, turned up to full power, creates an abstract sense of threat. Your own neural glitch can generate the feeling of a second body nearby. But all of this only explains a formless presence. It's like an alarm. It screams that there's a burglar in the house, but it doesn't show you their face. How does the brain turn this disembodied fear into a specific, visible figure in your peripheral vision? For that, it has another, even more fundamental mechanism: an innate program that makes us see faces in clouds, electrical outlets, and the chaos of shadows on a wall. Look at this electrical outlet. At that rock formation. At the clouds. You see faces, even when you know it's an illusion. And you can't turn it off. Why does the brain, even after recognizing the mistake, continue to make it? This is pareidolia. But it's not a bug, it's an aggressive survival feature. For your ancestors, the ability to instantly spot a face in the foliage was a matter of life and death. The neural networks responsible for face recognition are the fastest in the brain, but they are calibrated for false alarms. The brain would rather see a face 100 times where there is none than miss a real one once. In the dim light of your bedroom, in a state of panic, this system doesn't shut down. It goes on high alert. The shadow person is its logical apotheosis. The brain takes minimal data, a dark patch, and maximum motivation, mortal terror, and completes it into the most dangerous image, a human figure. But why human? Why not an animal or an abstract monster? How does the brain of a paralyzed person in Japan and a teenager in Brazil arrive at the same image? The simple version: we live in a world of people. It's the most familiar template. But neuroscience reveals that your brain is a social organ. A vast portion of its resources is dedicated to recognizing and interpreting other people. To the brain, another person is the most complex and potentially dangerous object in the universe. Therefore, in a state of anxiety, the human detection system has the highest priority. The shadow is anthropomorphic, not because the folds of a blanket happen to look that way, but because the brain is purposefully searching for a human form. When scientists artificially induced a sense of presence, it was always human-like. It's the brain's default program for any unidentified threat. How does a familiar bedroom transform into a scene of horror at night? The objects are the same. By day, you see a chair with clothes on it. At night, a sinister figure. It's not just about the dim light distorting shapes. The problem is that the brain hates an information vacuum. In silence, your auditory cortex doesn't rest. It amplifies internal noises, your heartbeat, the flow of blood, and it interprets them as external footsteps or breathing. Your room is not filled with silence, but with sensory noise that your own panicked brain turns into the soundtrack for a nightmare. Tactile hallucinations, the feeling of pressure, are born the same way, from the misinterpretation of signals from your own paralyzed body. The brain manufactures all the evidence itself. So we've assembled the kit. Aggressive pareidolia provides the shape. The brain's obsession with social objects makes it human. And the amplification of sensory noise adds sound and tactile sensations. The mystery seems solved. We've explained why an unidentified, human-like figure appears in the dark. But this version crumbles as soon as we look at the details. It doesn't explain the shocking similarity in descriptions across the globe. Why not just a shadow, but a tall man in a hat? Why not just pressure, but an old hag sitting on my chest? Neuroscience gave us the engine, but not the content. Because your brain is not a blank slate. It is infected with stories. Next, we will crack the cultural code of the nightmare. We will see how ancient myths and modern memes create a library of images from which your brain, in a moment of terror, downloads a ready-made file for its hallucination. Look at this painting. Henry Fuseli's The Nightmare, 1781. A demon sits on the chest of a sleeping woman. The artist depicted the symptoms with frightening accuracy: suffocation, paralysis, a menacing presence. How could he have documented sleep paralysis over 100 years before it was scientifically described? The answer is simple. Myths did not create this experience. A universal neurobiological glitch caused people all over the world to create strikingly similar myths. The incubus in Europe, the Mara in Slavic folklore, the pisadera in Brazil. This isn't folklore. It's the first attempt to give a name and a face to the nameless terror your brain generates. Culture gave the nightmare its first costume. The image of a demon sitting on the chest became the perfect visualization for the real physical sensation of suffocation. The myth didn't invent the symptom, it gave it an explanation. This was the first firmware. What caused millions of personal nightmares in the early 2000s to merge into a single phenomenon called shadow people? The internet. At first, it brought relief. People who thought they were going crazy found thousands of testimonies from others. They realized they weren't alone. But this process had a side effect. Mass discussion standardized the nightmare. Specific archetypes emerged and became entrenched. The Hat Man, the Old Hag. Reinforced by drawings and stories, they became viral memes. The internet, like water, carved a single channel from thousands of small streams. Now, in a moment of paralysis, your brain isn't just looking for a human shape. It's looking for the exact figure it has already seen on forums. Studies show that after 2001, reports of the Hat Man began to appear exponentially. The internet gave your brain a ready-made file for its hallucination. Why this particular design? Tall stature, dark color, a face hidden by a hat. This isn't a random shape that happens to resemble the shadow of a coat rack. It is a psychologically perfect image of a threat. Tall stature signifies dominance. The dark color represents the unknown. But the key to it all is the absence of a face. It prevents you from reading its intentions and forces your presence detector to work at its maximum limit. The brain panics because it cannot identify the threat. It's like looking into dark, deep water. The lack of information forces you to assume the worst. The hat is a brilliant mimetic element. It enhances the horror by hiding the face while simultaneously creating a unique, easily recognizable image. The brain chooses not a random form, but the most effective form for your fear. So we have all the ingredients. We know how a glitch in vision, body paralysis, and innate pareidolia create a blank canvas. We know how cultural templates, from ancient myths to internet memes, give the brain the paint for the picture. It seems all the pieces of the puzzle are in place, but knowing the parts doesn't explain why the experience repeats, only getting worse. We don't need a parts list, we need an assembly manual, an algorithm that connects everything. All these elements are just gears in one large engine. Next, we will reveal the final, seventh key. It is not just an element, it is the loop of terror, a mechanism that feeds on your own fear. Understand it, and you will understand everything. Why is the first nightmare always the vaguest, while subsequent ones become unbearably real? What in the brain learns to make the horror better? You wake up paralyzed. The first reaction is animal panic. Within 2 or 3 seconds, the brain floods your blood with adrenaline. This seems logical, but it is not the effect, it is the cause. This panic is gasoline poured on smoldering embers. The release of stress hormones physically rewires how your brain works. Your presence detector and pareidolia system shift into an aggressive mode. The brain desperately searches the external world for the source of its internal terror. Remember this formula. You are not afraid because you see a shadow. You see a shadow because you are afraid. The brain finds what it's looking for in the visual noise, a human form. It creates a hallucination to explain the cause of its panic. And at that moment, disaster strikes. Instead of relief, the brain gets confirmation. I was right. The danger is real. There it is. This triggers a new, even more powerful release of adrenaline. The loop is closed. The shadow becomes the scapegoat for your terror. The brain focuses all its resources on it, making it sharper, giving it weight and volume. The air in the room seems to grow colder. The nightmare begins to live its own life, feeding on your fear. How does one nightly episode poison your entire life? After the first experience, you become terrified of falling asleep. You check the room, sleep with the lights on, avoid lying on your back. This looks like post-traumatic stress. But neuroscience reveals a cruel paradox. It is this very fear and anxiety before sleep that are the main triggers for sleep paralysis. By going to bed in a state of anxiety, you create the perfect conditions for the desynchronization of your brain and body. You are setting the stage. The nightmare wins when it makes you fear it before it even begins. You sleep more lightly, which increases the number of micro-awakenings, the perfect moments to start the loop. We've exposed the engine. The fear from paralysis triggers a hallucination. The hallucination confirms the fear. It seems there is no way out. But this is precisely the breaking point. If you remove fear from this equation, the entire system collapses. The shadow is a parasite that feeds exclusively on your panic. Deprive it of this food, and it will disappear. This mechanism is a complex lock, and fear is its deadbolt. Knowledge about it is the key that easily opens it. Next, we will bring all 7 keys together. We will turn theory into a tool. We will move from terror to control and give you back power over your reality. We have broken down the nightmare into 7 keys. Now we will assemble them into a single system to turn knowledge into a weapon. The first level, external data and templates. Key number 1, visual deception, creates a blurry, indistinct canvas. Key number 6, pareidolia, makes the brain instinctively search for a human sketch on this canvas. And key number 7, the cultural code, gives the brain paints and references. It's not just looking for a person, but a specific image from myths or the internet. These 3 elements are responsible for the hallucination's design. They explain why the shadow looks the way it does. We understand what the ghost looks like. Now let's figure out how the stage where it appears works. The second level, the hardware, the state of your brain. Key number 2, the body prison, creates the foundation, physical helplessness and vulnerability. Key number 4, the theater in your head, opens a portal between sleep and reality, allowing internal images to be projected outward. And key number 5, the presence detector, starts the unsettling soundtrack. It fills the room with an oppressive atmosphere, even before the figure appears. These 3 keys build the stage for the horror. Paralysis nails you to the bed, Hallucinations turn on the smoke machine, and the presence detector creates suspense. We have the character design and the stage. But all of this is static. Now we will add the energy that sets the whole mechanism in motion. The final systemic level, the engine. This is not just another ingredient. It is the recipe that binds everything together. Step 1. The neurobiological state. Paralysis and the active presence detector generates initial fear. Step 2. This fear activates the sensory level. The brain uses the canvas and paints, pareidolia and cultural memes to create a hallucination. Step 3. The appearance of the shadow confirms and multiplies the fear. Step 4. The intensified fear makes the neurobiological state even more extreme and the hallucination more real. The circle is complete. The shadow person is not an entity. It is a process. A self-sustaining cycle where fear is both the cause and the effect. Knowledge transforms you from a victim into an observer. We have answered all the questions. Now, the main question is for you. We have journeyed from primitive terror in a dark room to an understanding of how our brain works. We have deconstructed the nightmare to see its inner workings. Now, after everything you have learned, the main question is for you. What is the shadow person to you now? We ask you to write just one word in the comments that reflects your new understanding. Write glitch, if for you, it is primarily a predictable and now understandable error of our brain, a combination of neurobiological malfunctions that we have learned to recognize. Or write archetype. If you believe that, despite the scientific explanation, this image is something more, a universal embodiment of fear that the brain uses during this malfunction. A glitch or an archetype. A mechanical error or a universal symbol. Your choice will show how knowledge changes our perception of reality. Thank you for watching.